The year is 1847. The Texas sun beats down on the land, baking the soil and shimmering off the distant mesas. Here, on the edge of the frontier, lives Abigail Hawthorne, a woman forged by hardship. She is a widow, her husband taken by illness years ago. She lives alone in a small, sturdy cabin, a testament to her resilience. The cabin, built with her own two hands alongside her late husband, stands as a beacon of solitude amidst the vast, untamed wilderness. Abigail's days are filled with the rhythm of survival. She tends to her small garden, coaxing vegetables from the dry earth. She hunts, a skill she learned out of necessity, providing meat for her table. Evenings are spent mending clothes, reading by the dim light of a kerosene lamp, or simply listening to the sounds of the night. The chirping of crickets, the howl of coyotes, the rustling of leaves in the wind. Her life is a solitary one, but not lonely. Abigail finds solace in the land itself, in the rugged beauty that surrounds her. She knows every inch of her property, every twist and turn of the creek that runs nearby. She is a part of this land, and it is a part of her. Abigail is known to the other settlers, scattered miles apart, as a strong and capable woman. They respect her independence, her self-reliance. She is not one to ask for help, but she is always willing to lend a hand to those in need. Though she keeps to herself, there's a quiet strength about her that people admire. She's seen more than her fair share of trouble, and it shows in the set of her jaw and the glint in her eye. But beyond the small settlements, this land also belongs to the Comanche. A proud and fierce people, they roam the plains, hunting buffalo and living off the land. Tensions between the settlers and the Comanche are high, fueled by misunderstandings, fear, and the ever-present struggle for resources. Abigail, however, holds no animosity in her heart. She has always believed that there is room enough for everyone, if only people are willing to share. This belief will soon be tested in ways she never imagined. Her quiet life is about to change irrevocably by an act of compassion that will ripple outwards, touching the lives of both settlers and Comanche alike. One sweltering afternoon, as the sun hung heavy in the sky, Abigail ventured further than usual from her cabin. The creek, normally a gentle trickle, was swollen from recent rains, its banks muddy and treacherous. She needed to find a specific type of herb, one that grew only near the water's edge, to treat a persistent cough that had been plaguing her. She moved carefully, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and the buzzing of insects. Suddenly, she heard a faint cry, almost lost in the rush of the water. She stopped, her hand instinctively reaching for the rifle she always carried. Scanning the creek bank, she spotted it, a small figure struggling in the murky water. It was a boy no older than 10, his dark hair plastered to his face, his eyes wide with terror. He was trapped in quicksand, the treacherous earth sucking him deeper with every movement. Without hesitation, Abigail dropped her rifle and raced towards the creek. The quicksand was closer to the center than she'd initially thought, and each step she took was a gamble. "Hold on," she yelled, her voice strained against the sound of the water. "I'm coming." She knew she couldn't get too close, or she'd risk being trapped herself. Thinking quickly, she spotted a sturdy branch lying nearby. She grabbed it, testing its strength before carefully extending it towards the boy. "Grab the branch," she instructed, her voice firm but reassuring. "Hold on tight." The boy, his face streaked with mud and tears, reached out desperately and grasped the branch. Abigail, bracing herself against the bank, began to pull. The boy was heavier than she expected, and the quicksand held him fast. With a grunt of effort, she leaned back, using all her strength to slowly, steadily pull him free. Inch by agonizing inch, the boy emerged from the sucking mud. Finally, with a final surge, Abigail pulled him onto solid ground. He lay there, gasping for breath, his small body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Abigail knelt beside him, checking him for injuries. He was covered in mud, but seemed unharmed. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. The boy looked up at her, his eyes wide and scared. He didn't speak but nodded slowly. Abigail knew he probably didn't understand her words, but her tone conveyed her concern. He was clearly Comanche. This was just the beginning of an unexpected friendship. The boy, still shivering, looked up at Abigail with large, dark eyes. He was clearly scared, but there was also a flicker of curiosity in his gaze. Abigail, mindful of his fear, spoke softly, even though she knew he wouldn't understand her words. "It's all right," she said, her voice gentle. "You're safe now." She gestured towards her cabin, a small haven in the distance. "Come on," she encouraged. "Let's get you warmed up." She helped him to his feet, and together they walked slowly towards the cabin. The boy, hesitant at first, gradually relaxed, his small hand tentatively reaching out to hold Abigail's. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. Inside the cabin, Abigail set about making a fire in the hearth. The flames quickly crackled to life, casting a warm glow on the small room. She found a clean blanket and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders, offering him a comforting smile. "There," she said, "that should help." She then fetched a pot of water and placed it over the fire to heat. While the water warmed, she examined the boy more closely. He was thin, but his eyes were bright and intelligent. His clothes, made of simple leather, were well worn but clean. She tried speaking to him again, using simple gestures and a soothing tone. "What's your name?" she asked, pointing to herself. "I'm Abigail." The boy watched her intently, his expression unreadable. He then pointed to himself and said a word that sounded like Takakota. "Takakota," Abigail repeated, carefully pronouncing the unfamiliar name. "It's nice to meet you, Takakota." As the water began to boil, Abigail added some of her special tea, a blend of herbs known for its soothing properties. She poured a cup for Takakota, offering it to him with a warm smile. He hesitated for a moment, then cautiously took the cup, sniffing the fragrant liquid before taking a tentative sip. His eyes widened in surprise. He took another sip, then another, until the cup was empty. A small smile touched his lips. Abigail smiled back, relieved that he seemed to be relaxing. Communication was difficult, but Abigail and Takakota found ways to connect. She showed him her garden, explaining the different plants and their uses. He, in turn, pointed out different birds and animals, mimicking their calls and movements. They drew pictures in the dirt, sharing stories without words. Despite their different backgrounds and languages, a bond began to form between them. Abigail saw in Takakota a spark of resilience, a connection to the land that mirrored her own. And Takakota, in turn, found in Abigail a sense of safety and warmth, a kindness that transcended cultural differences. The initial fear began to melt away, replaced by a quiet understanding and a growing friendship. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, when Abigail heard the sound of approaching horses. Her hand instinctively went to her rifle, but she hesitated. She didn't want to frighten Takakota. Peeking through a crack in the cabin wall, she saw a group of Comanche warriors riding towards her cabin. They were tall and imposing figures, their faces painted with tribal markings, their eyes sharp and watchful. Leading the group was a man who stood out from the rest. He was older, his face etched with lines of wisdom and authority. He sat tall and proud on his horse. This was Chief Iron Bear. Abigail knew that they had come for Takakota. A mixture of apprehension and relief washed over her. She was glad that the boy would be reunited with his people, but she also felt a pang of sadness at the thought of him leaving. She opened the cabin door and stepped outside, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. The warriors stopped their horses a short distance away, their eyes fixed on her. Chief Iron Bear dismounted and approached her slowly, his expression unreadable. "I am Iron Bear," he said, his voice deep and resonant. He spoke in broken English, but Abigail understood him. "My son Takakota is here." Abigail nodded. "Yes," she replied. "He is safe." She turned and gestured towards the cabin. "Takakota," she called. The boy emerged from the cabin, his eyes widening as he saw his father. He ran towards him, and Iron Bear knelt down to embrace him. It was a touching scene, a father reunited with his lost son. Iron Bear then turned back to Abigail, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved my son's life," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I am in your debt." Abigail shook her head. "He needed help," she said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." Iron Bear studied her for a moment, his gaze intense. "Not everyone," he said quietly. "There are many who would have left him to die." He then offered Abigail a small, intricately carved wooden flute. "This is a gift," he explained, "a token of my gratitude." Abigail accepted the flute, turning it over in her hands. It was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, a symbol of the Comanche culture. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I will treasure it." Iron Bear then turned to his warriors and spoke to them in his native tongue. They dismounted their horses and approached Abigail, each offering her a small gift, a feather, a piece of turquoise, a carefully crafted arrowhead. It was their way of showing their appreciation, their way of honoring the woman who had saved the life of their chief's son. This was the start of an unusual alliance. The fragile peace established by Takakota's rescue was soon threatened. As word spread among the settlers about Abigail's interaction with the Comanche, suspicion and fear began to grow. Some saw her actions as naive, others as outright betrayal. They couldn't understand how she could befriend the very people they considered their enemies. One evening, a group of settlers, led by a gruff, outspoken man named Jebediah, approached Abigail's cabin. Jebediah was known for his hard stance against the Comanche, and his distrust ran deep. "Abigail," he called out, his voice harsh. "We need to talk." Abigail stepped out of her cabin, her expression calm but firm. "What is it, Jebediah?" she asked. "We've heard about you and the Comanche," he said, his eyes narrowed. "Saving that boy, accepting their gifts." "I saved a child's life," Abigail replied, her voice steady. "He was in danger." "They're savages, Abigail," Jebediah retorted. "You can't trust them. They'll take advantage of your kindness." "I don't believe that," Abigail said. "I believe that everyone deserves a chance." "You're being foolish," Jebediah insisted. "This land belongs to us. We're building a life here. They're just trying to steal it from us." "There's enough land for everyone," Abigail argued. "We just need to find a way to share it." The argument continued, escalating in intensity. The other settlers voiced their concerns, their fears fueled by years of conflict and mistrust. Abigail stood her ground, defending her actions and her beliefs. Meanwhile, tensions were also rising within the Comanche tribe. Some warriors questioned Iron Bear's decision to show gratitude to a settler. They believed that any interaction with a white man was a sign of weakness. A young, ambitious warrior named Kanthi was particularly vocal in his dissent. He believed that the only way to protect their land was through force. One day, a herd of cattle belonging to the settlers was driven off their land. Jebediah and his men immediately blamed the Comanche, despite the lack of any real evidence. They gathered their weapons, ready to retaliate. Kanthi, seeing this as an opportunity to provoke a conflict, encouraged his fellow warriors to prepare for war. The valley was on the brink of eruption, threatening to undo any chance of peace. Abigail, caught in the middle, knew she had to act quickly before it was too late. Abigail knew she had to reach Iron Bear before Jebediah and his men took matters into their own hands. She saddled her horse, a sturdy mare named Bess, and rode towards the Comanche camp, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The ride was long and arduous, the Texas sun beating down relentlessly. She passed familiar landmarks, the towering mesas, the winding creek, the vast expanse of the plains. Each mile brought her closer to the Comanche camp, but also closer to the potential for violence. When she finally arrived, she was met with suspicion and hostility. The Comanche warriors, their faces grim, surrounded her, their spears pointed menacingly. Kanthi, his eyes filled with hatred, stepped forward. "What do you want, white woman?" he demanded, his voice dripping with contempt. "I need to speak with Iron Bear," Abigail replied, her voice calm but firm. "Iron Bear will not speak with you." Kanthi sneered. You are a liar and a thief, like all your people. That's not true, Abigail protested. I only want to prevent bloodshed. Kanthi laughed. Bloodshed is inevitable, he said. This land belongs to us. We will not let you steal it from us. Just then, Iron Bear emerged from his tent, his expression grave. He silenced Kanthi with a wave of his hand. Let her speak, he said. The warriors parted, allowing Abigail to approach Iron Bear. She dismounted her horse and looked him in the eye. Iron Bear, she said, the settlers believe that your people stole their cattle. They are preparing to attack. Iron Bear's eyes flashed with anger. We did not steal their cattle, he said. We have no need for their cattle. I believe you, Abigail said. But Jebediah and his men are not listening to reason. They are blinded by fear and prejudice. What do you suggest we do? Iron Bear asked, his voice weary. We need to find a way to prove that your people did not steal the cattle, Abigail replied. We need to find the real culprits. Iron Bear considered her words for a moment. It will be difficult, he said, but I am willing to try. I do not want war. Together, Abigail and Iron Bear devised a plan. They would search for the missing cattle, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the real thieves. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope of preventing a bloody conflict. Abigail knew that this task was extremely dangerous. She was placing herself between two groups of people who hated each other, but if she could help them avoid a war, it would be worth it. The search for the stolen cattle led Abigail and Iron Bear on a grueling journey across the vast plains. They followed faint tracks, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the missing animals or their captors. Days turned into nights, and their hope began to dwindle. One evening, as they camped beneath a star-studded sky, Abigail and Iron Bear shared stories about their lives. Abigail spoke of her late husband, of their dreams of building a life on the frontier, and of the hardships they had faced. Iron Bear spoke of his people, of their traditions, and of their struggle to protect their land. Despite their different backgrounds, they found common ground in their shared love for the land and their desire for peace. Abigail realized that Iron Bear was a wise and compassionate leader, a man who genuinely cared for his people. Iron Bear, in turn, saw in Abigail a woman of courage and integrity, someone who was willing to risk everything for what she believed in. As they continued their search, Abigail noticed something that the settlers and even Iron Bear had missed. The cattle tracks weren't heading towards known Comanche territory. They veered west, towards a rugged canyon known to be frequented by bandits and outlaws. She pointed this out to Iron Bear, and his eyes narrowed. You think it was not the Comanche who stole the cattle? He asked. I think it's possible, Abigail replied. It will make sense. The bandits could sell the cattle in another territory and profit from the conflict between the settlers and the Comanche. Iron Bear nodded slowly. It is a good point, he said. We must investigate. They followed the tracks towards the canyon, their senses on high alert. As they approached the entrance, they heard the sound of gunshots and the lowing of cattle. They exchanged a look and dismounted their horses, approaching the canyon on foot. Peeking over the edge, they saw a group of men, rough and heavily armed, branding the stolen cattle with their own mark. It was clear that these were the real thieves. Abigail and Iron Bear knew they had to act quickly to stop them and prevent further bloodshed. They were about to confront a group of dangerous criminals, and their success was far from certain. They prepared themselves for a fight, and the only thing that was on their minds was to stop this conflict from escalating further. Abigail and Iron Bear knew they had to be smart. A direct assault would be suicidal. They needed a plan. We need to create a diversion, Abigail whispered, her eyes scanning the canyon for a weakness. Something to draw them away from the cattle. Iron Bear nodded. I have an idea, he said. He pointed to a narrow passage leading out of the canyon. I will create a rock slide. It will block the passage and distract them. You can then sneak in and release the cattle. It was a risky plan, but it was their only option. Iron Bear crept silently towards the passage, his movements as fluid and graceful as a mountain lion. Abigail, meanwhile, prepared herself to release the cattle. Iron Bear reached the passage and began to dislodge the loose rocks and boulders that lined the walls. With a mighty heave, he sent a cascade of rocks tumbling down, blocking the passage with a deafening roar. The bandits, startled by the sudden noise, rushed to investigate. They were armed and dangerous, their faces contorted with anger and confusion. Abigail seized the opportunity and slipped into the canyon, her heart pounding in her chest. She moved quickly and quietly, avoiding the gaze of the bandits as she made her way towards the cattle. She found the gate to the corral and, with a swift movement, unlatched it. The cattle, sensing their freedom, stampeded out of the corral, scattering the bandits in all directions. Chaos erupted in the canyon. The bandits, caught off guard, scrambled to regain control of the situation. Abigail, amidst the confusion, managed to slip away unnoticed. As she emerged from the canyon, she saw Iron Bear engaging the bandits in a fierce firefight. He was outnumbered, but he fought with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. Abigail knew she had to help him. She grabbed her rifle and joined the fray, her shots ringing out across the canyon. Together, Abigail and Iron Bear fought side by side, their courage and determination driving back the bandits. Finally, after a long and bloody battle, the bandits were defeated. Some lay dead, others fled into the wilderness, leaving behind the stolen cattle. Abigail and Iron Bear stood side by side, their bodies bruised and battered, but their spirits unbroken. They had faced death together, and their bond had been strengthened by the experience. They knew that this was not the end of the conflict, but it was a victory, a sign that peace was possible, even in this lawless land. And, most importantly, the settlers would now know that the Comanche were not responsible for the stolen cattle. News of the battle at the canyon spread quickly, reaching both the settlers and the Comanche. Jebediah and his men, initially eager for revenge, were shocked to learn that the Comanche had not stolen their cattle and that it was, in fact, a gang of outlaws. Iron Bear, on the other hand, faced opposition from Confi and other warriors who still distrusted the white settlers and saw Abigail as a threat. Abigail knew that this was a critical moment. The truth was out, but the underlying tensions remained. She decided to ride to the settlers' camp and speak with them directly, hoping to bridge the gap between the two communities. When she arrived, she was met with a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Jebediah, humbled by the revelation that he had been wrong about the Comanche, reluctantly agreed to listen to what she had to say. Jebediah, Abigail began, her voice calm and measured, "We have a chance to build something better here. We can learn to coexist, to respect each other's differences." "It's not that simple, Abigail," Jebediah replied, his face etched with skepticism. "There's too much bad blood between us." "I know there's been conflict," Abigail said, "but we can't let the past define us. We have to look to the future." She spoke of her friendship with Iron Bear, of his desire for peace, and of the shared values that bound them together. She reminded them of their own dreams of building a life in this land, of creating a community where their children could thrive. Her words began to resonate with the settlers. They saw the sincerity in her eyes, the passion in her voice. They realized that she was not just defending the Comanche, but also advocating for their own well-being. "What do you propose we do, Abigail?" Jebediah asked, his tone softening. "I propose we meet with Iron Bear and his leaders," Abigail replied. "We sit down together and discuss our differences. We find a way to share this land, to respect each other's boundaries." Jebediah hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Abigail," he said. "I'm willing to try, but I can't promise anything." Abigail smiled, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was determined to do everything in her power to bring peace to the valley. She would be the bridge between these two cultures, even if it meant facing danger and disapproval from both sides. She understood that this was her purpose now. The meeting between the settlers and the Comanche took place in a neutral location, a wide-open meadow near Harmony Falls. Abigail chose the spot because it was a place of natural beauty, a place where both groups could feel at peace. As the settlers and the Comanche arrived, a tense silence fell over the meadow. Jebediah and Iron Bear, the leaders of their respective communities, stood facing each other, their expressions guarded. Abigail stepped forward, placing herself between them. "We are here today to talk," she said, her voice clear and strong, "to find a way to live together in peace." The negotiations were long and difficult, fraught with mistrust and resentment. The settlers demanded that the Comanche stay off their land, that they cease their hunting expeditions, and that they abide by the laws of the white man. The Comanche, in turn, demanded that the settlers respect their traditions, that they stop encroaching on their hunting grounds, and that they recognize their right to exist. Abigail listened patiently, mediating between the two groups, trying to find common ground. She reminded them of their shared humanity, of their common desire for a better future. She spoke of the importance of understanding, of respect, and of compromise. "We may have different customs, different beliefs," she said, "but we are all human beings. We all want the same things: a safe place to live, a good life for our children." She proposed a plan that would allow both the settlers and the Comanche to coexist in the valley. The settlers would have their farms and their towns, but they would respect the boundaries of the Comanche hunting grounds. The Comanche would be allowed to continue their traditional way of life, but they would agree to abide by certain laws and regulations. The negotiations dragged on for days, but finally, after much debate and compromise, an agreement was reached. The settlers and the Comanche agreed to respect each other's boundaries, to trade fairly, and to settle disputes peacefully. Iron Bear and Jebediah, their faces etched with weariness, but also with a glimmer of hope, signed the agreement, sealing the peace between their two communities. Abigail watched them, her heart filled with gratitude and relief. She had done it. She had brought peace to the valley. But she knew that the agreement was just the first step. The real challenge would be to implement it, to ensure that both the settlers and the Comanche honored their commitments. She knew that there would be setbacks and challenges along the way, but she was determined to see it through. Her commitment to peace was unshakable. The Harmony Falls Agreement, as it came to be known, was a testament to Abigail's unwavering commitment to peace and understanding. It was a complex document, carefully crafted to address the needs and concerns of both the settlers and the Comanche. One of the key provisions of the agreement was the establishment of clear boundaries between the settlers' land and the Comanche hunting grounds. These boundaries were marked by natural landmarks, rivers, mountains, and forests, ensuring that both groups had access to the resources they needed to survive. The agreement also established a system of trade between the settlers and the Comanche. The settlers would provide the Comanche with manufactured goods, such as tools, cloth, and weapons, in exchange for buffalo hides, meat, and other natural resources. This trade would not only benefit both groups economically, but would also foster a sense of interdependence and cooperation. Another important provision of the agreement was the establishment of a council composed of representatives from both the settlers and the Comanche. This council would be responsible for settling disputes, enforcing the terms of the agreement, and addressing any new challenges that might arise. The agreement also included a clause that prohibited both the settlers and the Comanche from engaging in acts of violence against each other. Any violation of this clause would be dealt with swiftly and decisively by the council. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the Harmony Falls Agreement was its emphasis on education and understanding. The settlers agreed to learn the Comanche language and customs, and the Comanche agreed to learn the English language and the laws of the white man. This exchange of knowledge would help to break down the barriers of mistrust and prejudice that had long separated the two communities. The agreement was not perfect, and it did not solve all the problems facing the settlers and the Comanche. But it was a start, a foundation upon which they could build a more peaceful and prosperous future. Abigail knew that the success of the agreement depended on the willingness of both groups to honor their commitments, to respect each other's differences, and to work together towards a common goal. She committed herself to ensuring that the Harmony Falls Agreement would not just be a piece of paper, but a living testament to the power of understanding and compassion. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey, but she was ready to take the first step. In the months that followed the signing of the Harmony Falls Agreement, Abigail worked tirelessly to promote understanding and cooperation between the settlers and the Comanche. She organized joint celebrations, bringing the two communities together to share food, music, and stories. She encouraged the settlers to learn the Comanche language and customs, and she helped the Comanche to understand the laws and traditions of the white man. Slowly but surely, the deep-seated prejudices that had long divided the two communities began to erode. Settlers who had once viewed the Comanche as savage and untrustworthy began to see them as human beings, with their own hopes, dreams, and fears. Comanche warriors who had once seen the settlers as invaders and thieves began to recognize their shared humanity. One day, a group of Comanche children visited the settlers' school, eager to learn to read and write. The settlers' children, initially hesitant, soon welcomed them with open arms. They played together, laughed together, and learned from each other. It was a heartwarming sight, a symbol of the new era of peace and understanding that was dawning in the valley. However, not everyone was happy with the progress that was being made. Conthi, still bitter and resentful, continued to sow seeds of discord among the Comanche. He accused Iron Bear of betraying his people and of selling out to the white man. He urged his fellow warriors to reject the Harmony Falls Agreement and to resume their fight for their land. Jebediah also faced opposition from some of the settlers who still clung to their prejudices and distrusted the Comanche. They accused him of being weak and of giving away too much to the Indians. They threatened to break the agreement and to drive the Comanche out of the valley. Abigail knew that she had to address these concerns before they undermined the progress that had been made. She organized a meeting with Conthi and Jebediah, hoping to persuade them to put aside their differences and to embrace the spirit of cooperation. She was about to face her greatest challenge yet, and the future of the Harmony Falls Agreement hung in the balance. She had to convince these two men that peace was possible and that it was worth fighting for. The meeting with Conthi and Jebediah was held in Abigail's cabin, a symbol of her commitment to both communities. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with suspicion and resentment. Conthi, Abigail began, her voice firm but gentle. I know you believe that the Harmony Falls Agreement is a betrayal of your people, but I assure you it is not. It is a chance for us to live together in peace, to protect our land and our way of life. Peace is a lie, Conthi retorted, his eyes filled with anger. The white man will never. Peace is a lie, Conthi retorted, his eyes filled with anger. The white man will never respect us. They will always try to take our land, to destroy our way of life. That may be true of some, Abigail conceded, but not all. I believe that we can find a way to live together, to respect each other's differences. She turned to Jebediah. Jebediah, you've seen the truth. You know that the Comanche are not our enemies. We share this land. We can either fight over it until there's nothing left, or we can work together to build a better future for all. Jebediah, his face etched with conflict, looked from Abigail to Conthi. He saw the anger in Conthi's eyes, but he also saw the sincerity in Abigail's. He thought of the children, both Comanche and settler, playing together, learning together. He knew that Abigail was right. Abigail's right, Conthi, Jebediah said, his voice firm. We can't let the past define us. We have to look to the future. He extended his hand to Conthi. I'm willing to try if you are. Conthi hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached out and shook Jebediah's hand. It was a small gesture, but it was a sign that the seeds of peace had been sown. Abigail smiled, her heart filled with hope. She knew that there would still be challenges ahead, that the road to peace would be long and difficult. But she also knew that it was possible. She had seen it with her own eyes. In the years that followed, the Harmony Falls Agreement flourished. The settlers and the Comanche learned to live together in peace, to respect each other's differences, and to work together towards a common goal. They traded fairly, settled disputes peacefully, and celebrated each other's traditions. Abigail continued to serve as a bridge between the two communities, a diplomat, a peacemaker. She dedicated her life to fostering understanding and preventing future conflicts. She became a legend in the valley, a symbol of hope and resilience. In Takakota, the young Comanche boy she had saved from the quicksand grew up to become a leader in his tribe, a champion of peace and understanding. He never forgot the kindness that Abigail had shown him, and he dedicated his life to honoring her memory. The Valley of Harmony Falls became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of compassion, and a symbol of what can be achieved when people are willing to put aside their differences and work together towards a common goal. The legacy of Abigail Hawthorne lived on, inspiring generations to come. Her simple act of kindness had changed the world, one heart at a time.